Ward and Joe Worthington with me, two members of the Strategies Group team on opposite sides of the business, one in sales, one in support. So today I wanted to learn about ERP transactions. I understand that if you go over a certain amount of transactions, that can up your tier level in Acumatica, and that's about it. That's all I know.
Well, but starting from the beginning with the sales process, one of the things we have to do is determine where someone's going to fit in the Acumatica tier structure. And the only way we have of knowing that up front is commercial transactions. Mm-hmm. So accounts payable invoices, purchase orders, sales orders, production orders. We can learn from the current company's system how many of those types of transactions they're going to do. That places them in a particular tier. Then once they are actually operating in Acumatica, then we have to start being concerned more about ERP transactions.
ERP transactions are effectively the way that Acumatica is able to offset their charges from Amazon Web Services for compute, right? So the busier that you are in your Acumatica system, the more ERP transactions you're going to be generating against the database. And they need to pay for that compute. Mm-hmm. So that's where that metric comes into play. So for every commercial transaction, there may be a dozen or more ERP transactions that get generated depending on the complexity of the document or operation. Mm-hmm. And the same is also true if you have a lot of integrations or connected applications. Anything that hits the API is also talking to the system, talking to the database, generating those transactions, increasing the volume, and you need to be able to cover that in your tier.
Okay, so I didn't know that aspect. So if you're integrating a third-party system to your ERP, to Acumatica, then those transactions, any data that comes over is something that is labeled as an ERP transaction.
Yeah, it will subsequently generate ERP transactions because it is still working with primary documents or GIs or importing data or exporting it. So read, write on the database, those types of operations generate ERP transactions.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, look, learning something
new. So, because on the sales side, we don't, I guess the sales side just needs to have somewhere to start.
Yeah, base.
And then once we're in implementation and once we get into actual go live usage of the software, that's when we can really start to hone in on the ERP of how a company is going to be based on those ERP side.
Yeah, and it's a true metric of how much they're utilizing the system overall for all operations.
Right, yeah. Right.
So let's take a step back. So the ERP transactions help us decide the pricing for the customer. That's how
commercial transactions help us figure that out up front.
Okay.
And then it would be like commercial transactions give you a really big overall view, and then the ERP transactions give you a more finite, defined view of what that company is going to look like using the software.
Yeah, it depends on complexity, amount of usage, number of users. You do get that upfront view from the commercial transactions, and then over time, which is really the only way you're going to be able to tell, you'll see the trend for ERP transactions. And the longer a user is in Acumatica, the longer a company has their data stored there, I would expect that to trend up over time, especially as they become more complex and use more integrations, third-party systems.
And of course, Acumatica provides a really deep system administrative dashboard for companies to be able to see, or for us as a partner to be able to see, here's the volume that they're operating at. Here's their number of commercial transactions. Here's the number of ERP transactions. Here's the number of API web calls, and all of that in a dashboard so that us and the customer are able to see that that's actually happening. It's not a situation where we're just going to them and saying, oh, you're blowing this out. We can actually show them the data that shows this is how this is happening.
That's awesome, yeah.
You can see it on a screen by screen basis and see how many you're getting per day, what they're getting generated for, to an extent.
That's awesome. Yeah. So then, I understand there's like tier levels too. So is it common for a customer to come in originally after the sales process and then maybe have to increase their tier level or decrease their tier level accordingly?
Initial estimates tend to be fairly conservative. We try not to underpitch anything, but when you're first getting started, you're not going to look at necessarily all the growth that you're expecting over time.
Yeah.
Right? And from the beginning of an implementation to the completion, you may hit a couple of different milestones as a business where you're ticking up
Yeah.
and increasing volume, right? Or
I think
you just
another
look out and get some contracts.
Right.
Right. I
Right.
think another side of that also is you end up using the system in ways that you never even realized that you would be able to use them. And maybe that's a cause to increase those transactions. So like once you get in front of like our amazing group of consultants, they'll be able to kind of unlock some new things that you might not have known about.
It's interesting that a company that's been on the same client server old technology for 20 years now has modern technology and new processes and new ways of doing things. Like, just an example, many companies take all of their credit card expenses and put them through accounts payable. Well, that makes it look like they're doing 2,000 AP invoices a month.
Yeah.
Now we have a credit card management system that's not part of the AP system. So we've just eliminated 1,000 expenses a month. So their commercial transaction side of things goes down. But now we may have more ERP transactions because one credit card expense becomes an ERP transaction in the expense management module, but then it also creates an AP invoice to pay the credit card. So you've got more and more and more transactions. All of
It's
that.
a cascading system
Right.
where one action may result in multiple other actions behind the scenes.
Right.
And since it's a measure of the activity in the database, you can really see an increase depending on the types and complexity of different documents.
Well, that's awesome. I certainly learned something new today. Sounds like Shannon did too.
I did too.
Yeah, so have a good rest of your day, and thank you guys for joining me.
Thank you, Salina.
Thanks, guys.
All right.